everyone, welcome back to Callie and Beans Books. I'm Brittany and today I'm going to do a romance tag for you. I decided not to do a romance readathon this month for February just because I felt like I was going to be rushed with it as I'm still finishing up the Throne of Glass series. So I decided just to take a break. I might do a romance readathon later this year, but I'm not entirely sure yet. Callison found a romance tag for me to do instead. I'm really excited about these. To jump into it, I have some that will have book examples and some that are just going to be author recommendations and things like that. The first prompt is the first romance book you remember reading. And of course in high school I read Nicholas Sparks. I read a couple in college. I don't really count those because I don't remember all of the plots and things like that. I'm going to say the first romance I remember reading after getting back into reading, The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I absolutely adored this book, and right after I read this one, I jumped into The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. So those two I would count as my first romance reads when I started getting back into reading in 2019. The most recent adult romance I've fully read is Blossoms in Steel by Mindy Michelle, and this is a dual author. I did enjoy the story. It is more fade to black. It is more mild, so it's definitely not my favorite, but I did enjoy the story as a whole. I did pick it up because I found the follow-up Copper and Ink on TikTok. But when I went to read that one, it did have a little title page saying, to fully enjoy this series, you want to read the first one. So I did, and I took a pause on Copper and Ink to jump into Throne of Glass. So once I finish Throne of Glass, I'll probably go back and finish Copper and Ink. But those two are my most recent adult romance reads. Going into recommendations, the next prompt is a book I would recommend to a newbie to adult romance, and I picked up two. The first being Twice in a Blue Moon by Christina Lauren. I think realistically Christina Lauren in general is a good duo author to jump into if you're first starting adult romance. There's not a lot of smut, it's not very spicy, but it does dip into a little bit, not so fade to black, but not super spicy, if that makes sense. And of course, I can't go through a romance video without mentioning the Bromance book club by Alicia K. Adams. This is absolutely one of my favorites. Again, it's not super spicy. There are some scenes, but it's not throughout the entire book. This is a second chance romance, and I absolutely adored it. All four that are in the series, and it's just amazing. I thoroughly enjoy Alicia K. Adams' writing, so I definitely recommend these two if you are new to adult romance. On the flip side, the next prompt is recommendations for a romance reader. This one I would have to have a little bit more details for recommendations. If you're more into like the fluffy rom-coms, I've got two. Those would be The Good Luck Charm by Helena Hunting and It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. These two, they're a little bit more spicy. They're the traditional adult romance. The Good Luck Charm is a second chance romance, and then It Happened One Summer, it's not necessarily enemies to lovers, it's more of the sunshine grumpy trope. I absolutely adore both of these stories. If you like the fluffy rom-coms, those two are definite high recommendations. On the flip side, if you like more of the fantasy romance reads, I'm gonna go with From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. Of course, this thick beast is a little difficult to get into. If you like the ones that jump right into it, A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair is another fantasy adult romance that I absolutely love. It is more spicy, and it is a Persephone Hades retelling, and I absolutely adore it. Callison got me into it and highly recommend that one. Another fantasy romance that I recommend is the Plated Prisoner series. That includes Gild, Glint, and Gleam by Raven Kennedy, and the fourth one comes out in May, which is Glow. I'm so excited for that one. These books, though, have a lot of content warnings, so please be sure to check those out before you jump into this series because it is very intense, but I absolutely love it. The next two prompts I really don't have examples for. These are an underrated book that you wish more people would talk about, and then of course on the flip side, an overrated book you wish people would stop talking about. I don't really like chiming in on these. I used to have an opinion on them. However, right now I really don't. Not really sure what's being super hyped, so I don't really have examples for these two books. If you do, I would love to hear your opinions. I, however, do not. The next prompt is my auto-buy author. I do have three, and those authors are Tessa Bailey, Helena Hunting, and Alicia K. Adams. I will buy any books they publish. I absolutely love their writing styles, and their stories are just so intriguing to me, and I'm very excited to continue reading their books. An author I used to love but have since abandoned, and that is Christina Lauren. I did really enjoy The Unhoneymooners. Then I read a couple of their backlogged books and didn't really enjoy them. So like the peak for me was The Unhoneymooners, and since then I just have a bad taste from Christina Lauren, so I just kind of avoid their books for right now, especially when I have other authors that I really do enjoy. The next couple of prompts all have to do with tropes. The next one being my favorite trope, which is enemies to lovers. I absolutely adore this trope, and my example for that is Kiss My Cupcake by Helena Hunting. On the flip side, a book that I didn't like, even though it has my favorite trope, is Ruthless by Lexi Blake. I read this, I think my first read-a-thon, which was in 2020. It was okay at the time. I did enjoy it. Something about it that I'm like, it could have been done a little bit better. So overall, this is one that I would say I didn't like for enemies to lovers. On the flip side, my most hated trope is the miscommunication trope. I can't stand it. And it's usually one of those things where it's a very sneaky trope, where it's hidden amongst something else like second chance or enemies to lovers. Then all of a sudden, like, the conflict is the miscommunication. Grinds my gears. Do something else. With that, a book that I enjoyed, even though it has the miscommunication thrown in there, is The Right Swipe by Alicia Ray. This is, again, an enemies to lovers story, but the main conflict is miscommunication. I still enjoyed it because it wasn't overdone, so I do enjoy this one. And these are the stories also that are really hard to reread, because once you know that the conflict is a miscommunication and they still have the happy ending, it's like, well, I know what's coming. Even though that's how most romance reads are, they have some sort of conflict, but they still have the happy ending. It's something about miscommunication that really just turns me off of a book. The next prompt is my problematic favorite. I'm not entirely sure what this is referring to. I don't really have an example of those, mostly because I haven't really dipped my toe into those dark romances, like the bully romances. The only one I can really think of is A Touch of Darkness, because their relationship can get a little toxic and a little controlling from time to time, but I can't commit to it because I'm not entirely sure if that's what the prompt is referring to. The next prompt is a book everyone has loved, but that has you scratching your head. This one is Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey Mcquiston. When this first came out, everyone was talking about it and everyone said how much they loved this book. I read it and went, why? I almost DNF'd this book. The only reason I finished it was at the time Callison and Sarah and I were buddy reading it. Everyone was hyping this book up like it was the best thing in romance at the time. I read it and I just cringed a lot throughout the entire story. So the next prompt is a romance cover that you love. I have too many to choose from, so I narrowed it down to 4. The first one being Kiss My Cupcake, going along with How to Love Your Neighbor by Sophie Sullivan. Both of these are very similar. We've got the pastel colors, the illustrated couple, and their postures and things like that. They're very similar, but I love them. The other cover that I love is Crazy Stupid Bromance, only because it has the cat and it makes sense for the story. Otherwise, it's also the color, and it's Lyssa Kay Adams, so I wanted to mention it. Finally, I also want to mention the Plated Prisoner series again. These covers are absolutely gorgeous. I do plan on purchasing the physical books, even though I have them saved on my Kindle. There's just something about these covers that I need on my shelves. So the next prompt is a book you've read more than twice. I don't really have one. Ta-da! A Court of Mist and Fury is, in my mind, a fantasy romance. Of course, we have a lot going on with Farah. This is the second in the ACOTAR series, if you don't already know. ACOTAR really isn't a romance, but ACOMAF definitely is. And this is my go-to. This is my happy place. I love everything about this story. Farah's journey is amazing through ACOMAF, and I will say this is one that I will continue reading forever. It's my go-to. So I've definitely read this more than twice. I actually just finished the audiobook last week because I have no self-control when it comes to this audiobook. It's my favorite. Speaking of amazing romance audiobooks, the next prompt is the best one. Of course, there are multiple romances that I really enjoy. One sneaky one that you really don't find unless you have the Audible subscription and it's included is the Extra series by Megan Walker and Jancy Patterson. The Extra series includes The Extra, The Girlfriend Stage, and Everything We Are. I fell in love with this series. It was very interesting and very intriguing to me. and I was a little nervous on it. The first ones, it took me a little bit to get into, but then I fell in love with all of the characters and really wanted more. After everything we are finished, I was like, ooh, I want more. There are more books to it, but I think they're not on Audible yet, or they're in the works or something. I haven't looked into it lately, but I definitely enjoyed these audiobooks. The next prompt is a romance person you follow on Twitter. I have a Twitter. I don't use it. The only time like I go on Twitter, if I'm being completely honest, is if it's during a football game and I'm curious on what people are saying about like a hit, a call, or something like that. Otherwise, I think Twitter is super toxic and just gross in general, so I avoid it like the plague. No thank you. So instead, I'm going to say the romance authors I follow on TikTok, and I follow two that I want to mention, one being Tessa Bailey, just because I absolutely adore her, so of course I'm going to follow her on TikTok. The other author I follow is Elle Kennedy. I stumbled across her page on TikTok by her advertising or talking about one of her books, and I was like, this is interesting. So I started following her and actually read two of her books and absolutely adore her writing now. So those are two authors that I follow on TikTok. I don't really get a lot of my book recommendations from BookTube anymore. I do on TikTok, and that's the next prompt, is where I go for reviews and recommendations. And a couple of the TikTokers that I follow: Forever Booked Up, Ashley Reads Books with periods in between Ashley and Reads, Bumblebeezus, not entirely sure if that's exactly how she wants her username to be pronounced, and then The Book Goat, also known as Chelsea Palmer. Found her originally on BookTube and have since started following her on BookTok. Absolutely love her recommendations and reviews. Those are the four that I recommend following if you're on BookTok. Otherwise, Chelsea Palmer is my go-to on BookTube for adult romance. The next prompt is a character that reminds you of yourself. Honestly, I don't really have one. There are situations I connect to with books, but I don't necessarily connect myself with a certain character. I don't know if that just makes me weird, but I haven't been able to find a character that I'm like, yeah, this is definitely me. I mean, I do find traits of myself in some characters, but I wouldn't be able to necessarily say that one character is how I feel about myself. So that's one prompt that I didn't really know how to answer. The next prompt is best romance or rom-com movie. I don't really have an opinion, if I'm being completely honest. I know that there are really popular ones, but I will say my favorite right now is Set It Up. It's a movie I found on Netflix with my friend Ashley. It's one of my go-tos if I want to watch a Netflix movie, if I need just like a pick-me-up, or if I'm having a glass of wine and want to watch a movie. That's my go-to. But right now, I'm not up to speed on rom-coms, so my favorite right now is Set It Up. The next two prompts are my favorite heroine and my favorite hero. Now, I did try to stay away from the same couple, I would say. My favorite heroine right now is Arin from the Plated Prisoner series. She goes through so much and has such an impressive story, and I absolutely adore her. She is such a strong female character. I don't want to give away my favorite hero from the story because it is, in my opinion, a little bit of a spoiler. So my favorite hero, I was debating choosing him, but I couldn't not, and that is Cassian from A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. He goes through so much with Nesta in the entire series. He's definitely one of my favorite supporting characters in ACOTAR itself, and then getting his perspective in this story is just amazing. I absolutely love him. He's my favorite bat boy, so he's my favorite hero. Now, this last prompt is very difficult because it's my all-time favorite romance. And as you can tell from this whole video, I don't really have one that's my all-time favorite. Of course, I can probably narrow it down to Aquamath. If I have to give an answer, that is my go-to. Like I said earlier, it's my happy place. Otherwise, I would say the Bromance book club as a whole is my favorite, but it's really hard to narrow it down because it kind of goes in waves. Like, I'll find one that I absolutely adore, but I always circle back to Bromance book club and Aquamath. So that is my romance book tag. I had a lot of fun going through my books and going through my recommendations. There's a lot of books that, of course, I could have easily said for multiple prompts. I tried really hard not to repeat, but I'm very excited about the books that I mentioned in this tag. Be sure to subscribe to our channel. We post new videos every Tuesday and Thursday with some Sundays. Hit that little bell icon to be notified when we do post new videos. Be sure to share your favorite videos with friends and family, and we would love to hear your opinions in the comments below. And feel free to follow us on Instagram and Goodreads. All of our links will be in the description below. Until next time, bye.